Welcome back to the Boundary Corner podcast. With Brian Siegel, I'm Curtis Wilson. Tonight, we have a very special guest, former Hokie offensive lineman and current Hanover Hawk assistant football coach, Austin Cannon.
Hey, Austin. How you doing tonight, bud?
Pretty good, man. How you doing?
Oh, can't complain. Thanks for jumping on with us here.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, man, we appreciate it. How's your day been?
Oh, man, it's been long. Been up since 5 a.m. and, just working, getting ready for the season.
Now, have y'all already started camp up at Hanover, or is it next week?
No, we start Monday. Tomorrow we finish up our summer workouts with, big squat Friday and the conditioning.
The tradition continues.
Oh, yeah. For sure.
Nice, man. What's y'all's first game? Are y'all playing Labor Day weekend as well, or are y'all a little later than that?
I believe we got September 1st or 2nd.
Okay.
And we're home against Monacan. So.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be a great matchup. They had some players last year, but we'll see what they got, and we have a lot of momentum, coming in from that spring season, and the guys are excited, the staff is excited, so we're ready to go.
So you were coaching in the spring. I know you had a big decision, kind of as last season wrapped up. Was getting into coaching kind of your plan in college, or was that something that just kind of presented yourself as you were kind of taking those next steps?
I mean, I knew all along that I was going to coach. I kind of, figured it out when, it was my senior year in high school. Started coaching Hanover Warriors, like 10U. And, I really enjoyed it. And, that kind of gave me the idea. It was like, hey, I know football is going to end one day, and for me to continue to be involved in the game, coaching was definitely, something in my future.
Awesome.
I hear that,
yeah,
man.
Love to hear that.
So that sounds like you probably thought about it even before that, which is unbelievable. And now, getting a chance to go out there, shape some football here in the RVA. But let me ask this. What is it like working for the head coach of the Hanover Hawks, Sam Rogers, guy you obviously probably played against in high school and then played with up at Virginia Tech?
Yeah, Sam's a great guy. There's, Hanover High School, they did a great job, in hiring him and, what he's trying to do with that program. And, it's unbelievable, and, I trust what he's doing. Me and him have the same mentality, kind of bringing that Virginia Tech, mentality to that program. And, we're wired the same way. And so just that cohesiveness and that, relationship, I think it's awesome. I couldn't ask for a better head coach, to start out my coaching career. So.
Are y'all doing some similar things that y'all were doing in Blacksburg, or is it kind of a mix of different philosophies and schemes?
It's very similar to what we ran, at Tech, in terms of like the spread offense and things like that. And, he's brought like his own little twist to, some things, when he was in the league for a little bit, that little bit of time he was in there. And, just his football IQ is like, it's impeccable, and he's such a smart football player and now a football coach. And, I'm kind of like learning the ropes, in terms of the whole grand scheme of things. Cause, for most of my life, I was just worried about that box, that front seven. I didn't really have to worry about the defensive backs or anything like that. But, now I kind of have to, pay attention to those things because, I recently got, put on as a role as a JV, offensive coordinator. Okay. So, he's been, working with me the past, 2.5 months. We meet every Thursday, and he's kind of teaching me all the passing concepts, and we're talking about receivers and DBs, defensive coverages, and all that kind of stuff. I was like, ooh, okay.
Little crash course, right?
Yeah, a little crash course. And so, I've been studying up on it, and, I'm excited to take on that new role. It's a new challenge, and, I love new challenges, and, it's going to make me grow and be a better football coach.
Well, man, I'm almost ready to have you back in like 5 or 6 weeks after you've called some of those JV games, just to hear what's going on and hear some of your play calls from your sheet.
Yeah,
man. So obviously today was first day of fall camp for the Virginia Tech Hokies, and we're seeing the pictures. We're seeing everybody seems happy today. Day one, right? So me and Brian were talking. We wanted to kind of ask you, as a player, what was the part of the camp you looked forward to the most? But then what was the dread day? What was the day, you hit like day 7 and day 8 is this, and it's like, got to get it over with, but not looking forward to it. So what was the favorite day first of camp?
Favorite day was obviously you got to go with first day of pads.
There we go.
We open it up. We always open it up first day of pads with a Hokie drill. And it's a competition, between running backs, linebackers, and wide receivers, DBs, O-line, D-line, and eventually, Fuente will get us all in a circle, and he'll have the 2 bags in the middle, and he'll call out, specific guy from each side of the ball, and and we'll go at it, and we keep score.
There we go.
Tell you, offensive line got that winning record, so
there we go.
Proud to be on the winning side of that.
You got to keep the pride there.
Oh yeah. I'm a prideful guy. So, but yeah, and with the days that I dreaded it, I would say more of towards the end of camp.
Okay.
When you're like so close to the season, like you can almost taste it, and you're like, all right, like I've been going up against the same dude, twice a day.
Yep.
For however many weeks, and I'm just like, I want someone different, So that's definitely, that part is what I dreaded the most. But it flies by so fast.
We have a question here from one of our listeners tonight, Hokie Pharmacist.
Jeremy, shout out.
Name somebody that had to go up against Silas one time.
Who had to go up against Silas?
Yeah.
And Hokie drill?
In the Hokie drill.
Oh my gosh. You had Emmanuel Belmar, you had you had Justice Reed, you got Jared Hewitt. Pretty much everybody that you've seen play on the defensive line, has had a piece of Silas. And let me tell you, Silas is Silas. He's a
big boy.
Mountain of a man. All right, so I want to ask this, and if you don't want to talk about former teammates, don't. Who was the person when Fuente would call their name that you're sitting there like, man, I don't really want to go against him today? And I know you as a football player, y'all's mentality isn't like that, but I'm sure sometimes you heard a name and it was like, I don't want to do this drill with him, but you got to go out there and fight it.
Oh man, I'm never, scared of any man, but to answer your question, I would definitely have to go with Tim Settle. It's just, we're just talking about big guys. Like, this is a big guy podcast interview, so
exactly.
So Tim was always fun to go up against, and it was always a challenge. But when you've gone and done maybe about 3 or 4 Hokie drills, and all of a sudden you get called into the big circle, and you got to go up against Tim Settle. It's like, come on, man. But
there's always one dude that, like, you don't back away from it. You're not afraid of him. You're like, I know I'm gonna feel this once I hit him. I know I am.
Yeah, that's just, well, I think he was like 330 ish or so, like, and he's obviously trimmed down a lot since he's been in the league.
It's such a low center of gravity too. Like you can't get underneath him either. Like
no, and it's so hard. And like if you mess with your hands, if your hands go outside, and you're just screwed. All that power, the low center of gravity, that strength. Like you really have to have your technique down to a T, to compete with Tim. So
that's good to know. And obviously Tim really doing well for himself. And you had quite a few guys that were there during your time there. So it's cool to hear those type of stories from you with this. And by the way, last year we had John McLaughlin on, again, teammate of yours. And it must be an O-line thing because, Brian, if you don't recollect, it was some sort of drill he didn't like, was like what he looked forward to, first day of pads.
Yep.
But he was with you. It was near the end. He's like, that's when you start dreading it because I'm hitting the same guys. But you're also hitting your teammates. Mm-hmm. It's almost that feeling of, I want someone across from me that is not wearing maroon and orange, and I want to take it out on them.
Yeah.
And I love that mentality because y'all are all brothers there, and it's finally like we've practiced, we're ready to go.
Mm-hmm. But he kept saying, "I can't wait for mock game. I can't wait for mock game." That's what he kept saying. Like towards the end, like, when is mock game?
Yeah, mock game. That's really fun, and we take it very, very seriously. But in terms of like having a physical toll on your body, it's like one of the easiest days out of the camp schedule. And it's more mental than anything. Okay. It's basically like a dress rehearsal from the, right before we, get on the bus with the Friday walkthrough to, pretend, we're getting on the bus to how we're going to conduct Friday meetings and, Saturday morning meal, for breakfast and, kind of like the pregame meal and pregame meetings, kind of pick me up talks and stuff like that. And so, that's what I love too, how everything was so organized and, how serious it was, and, I think that's, kudos to Coach Fuente and his staff and how they run things. And, and it's freaking awesome.
Very nice to hear. Well, before we get to more with Austin Cannon tonight, we are going to take a quick 30-second break from our digital sponsors.
All right, Austin, we're going to jump back in here. We talked a little bit about camp opening up, kind of your favorite parts of camp, but let's talk a little bit more about some of the things from 2020, some of the unique challenges that COVID presented, especially in regards to fall camp. What was the biggest difference about fall camp in 2020 compared to your 4 previous camps with the Hokies?
2020 camp was, I would say, easy. I would say it was easier, compared to the other camps, simply because of the whole COVID stuff. Like the way it was formatted, you couldn't really, do as much. We were limited, back-to-back days and then like another day off, stuff like that. But when we got those 2 days in a row, don't get me wrong, we went after it.
Okay.
And we competed and, got ourselves better. But, if you want to compare it to the previous 4, definitely the easiest, but also the longest. It was so long. And, you talk about, you're getting kind of towards the end of camp and you're dreading it and you want to go up against somebody else. Well, that was the ultimate test right there, because, we were winding down towards the end of camp. You had the conferences kind of contemplating whether to have a season or not, then you had the Pac-12 and Big Ten. But then we knew that we were having a season. right? That was a plus.
Yep.
But then NC State had a breakout, right? They had to postpone, right? So we're gearing up, getting ready for NC State. Still going through that camp schedule, but then that got postponed. Then our focus shifted to UVA because that was week 2. Then all of a sudden, outbreak happened on our team. Something that we couldn't really control. If that makes sense. It was inevitable. And so that got postponed. Now we're kind of doing some more camp stuff. So like it kept on getting delayed. The season kept getting delayed. So therefore, we kind of kept with that camp schedule. And
you're kind of in purgatory there for a while, then.
Yeah, just it was terrible. I was just like itching to get the season started, and it just felt like 2 months, really. But it was like a month and a half.
I know something Coach Fuente mentioned in an interview with Tech Sideline about a couple weeks ago. He was saying there were times at camp there were no bodies there because of protocols. Like you guys were, you would have groups out, like half of this group's gone, 10 players from this group's gone. How difficult is that from your perspective now as a coach, saying, how did we do that last year when we couldn't do certain drills because we don't have enough players on the field?
Yeah, there was times where, we had, portions of our practice kind of taken out because of the lack of numbers. And like to give you an example, of kind of how the next man up, philosophy was, used. Like we had Brock Hoffman and Hoyt, Zachariah Hoyt, they had to like quarantine for some reason, right? And this is when quarantine was longer than when you got infected or something.
Yeah,
something crazy.
It was 10 days if you were infected and 14
if you weren't.
Yeah,
for contact tracing.
Yeah, you can take what you want about all that stuff, but I think it's absolutely ridiculous. I don't care if people disagree or agree with me or not. But, then I had to be put in at center. And, I've always snapped during pre-practice and, I knew how to play the position. So, it wasn't nothing surprising to me. But, I was in there taking first team reps at center. And, Cornelson, Vice, and Fuente, they were telling me how the offense didn't really skip a beat, when I was in there. And, that was good to hear. But, with me, I was just doing my job. I was doing the best I could for the team, for myself. And, so, it's the best I can do. That's why I'm there, to be a great teammate, great football player, and, and just gave it my best. So, but, in terms of lack of numbers, we were missing, our first 2 centers, first team, second team centers. And, you got guys jumping around different positions. We couldn't really do like a full team kind of like scrimmage period, sometimes. And, it did hurt us a little bit, but it wasn't like a major setback or anything. We found ways. We, worked around it and, got the most work we could.
So we had a little question here from a listener here. Was there a significant amount of like cross training, like offense to defense, or was that more relegated to the skill positions versus the line, or was there any of that, or was it just next man up, even if that next man is a walk on or anything like that?
Like you said, it doesn't matter who it was. To have an example for that question, we had Tyler Matheny, come in for Diablo, I believe, versus Duke, and he freaking balled out, man. We were so happy for him when he got that interception, like that sideline erupted, and so it doesn't matter if you're, a walk-on scholarship guy, 20 plus game starter, a guy that rotates or barely played. Like if you're on that depth chart, like your name could be called at any moment.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody when they went to practice, they were knowing that my name could be called like today or like in just like that, like an instant second. So everybody kind of took their job seriously when it came to practice because you just never know when your number was going to be called.
Okay, that makes sense.
So just the COVID landscape in general, what was the hardest part to navigate? I mean, I just sit here and think about it. You had football, obviously, super important. You had your own health to worry about. You had friends, you had class, you had family. What was like the piece that was the most difficult part for you last year going through just something no one had ever done in their entire lives?
I mean, I think, early on when they kind of shut everything down, we were just about to finish up winter workouts and, we got sent off for spring break. And, we're in the middle of spring break and then we're told like, hey, like we're locked down now. Like you guys might as well just stay where you're at or, go home. And, we were sending in some workout videos and, and just trying to do what we could. And I think that was hard because I'm like, dang, like this could be my last season, or I was thinking like this is my last season, not knowing about the extra year and all that stuff. And I'm like, this is how it's going to go. Like, there's no way. And then eventually, I think it was like, July or so, early June is when we got to come back and kind of be with the team again and see everybody. And I think, that kind of picked everybody up, in terms of morale and things like that. But also the testing. I mean, golly, man. Like, we're talking about sometimes, I think early on it was like twice a week, and then eventually it got ramped up to 3 times a week. And it's like, I don't want that swab up my nose one more time.
Man.
But,
that's got to get old quick.
Yeah, no, it did. It did. So, but, we had to do what we had to do in order to play a football season. And, that's what was important to us, is to have a season and play. And so we had to do whatever we had to do to get it done. And, but it sucked, but, we're tough guys. So, we just had to endure it and move on.
So you were talking earlier about, sending in the workout videos. If I recall correctly, weren't you, did you send in one pushing a truck?
Yeah, that was my 98 Ford Expedition. I mean, that workout, has been something of mine that I've done all throughout high school. Me and Alec Eberly, we used to push, our trucks. I used to have a Chevrolet Silverado. That was my first vehicle. And me and him would go at nighttime in the parking lot at Atlee and, put it in neutral and, he would steer and I would push and then we would switch. And so like I always loved pushing the truck. It was a great workout. And so, I was like, you know what, I'm going to send this in and, and I, got some positive reviews. Some of them, some good Ford jokes, but deep down, I'm a Chevy guy. I love the square bodies. But I mean, right now I drive a Ford Edge. I ended up getting rid of the Expedition. It was getting a little worn out, but it lasted me all throughout college, so I'm not complaining.
Okay.
Somebody jumped on here. They want to know how far you would push the truck in the parking lot.
Oh, in the parking, like this parking lot behind the school is ginormous, like easily over 100 yards. And if you pushed it towards the varsity practice field, it had a slight incline as you went farther and farther. So I would say probably about almost close to about 200 yards long.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
And so me and Alec would try to go, 3 times, each. So, yeah, it was a killer workout, but, I always loved it.
Shout out Jacob on that question. That was a great question. So 600 yards of pushing the 98 Ford Expedition by Austin Cannon in the Atlee parking lot in the RVA. You mentioned it just a few minutes ago, Austin. You didn't know about the extra year of eligibility. What kind of factors played into your decision to kind of pass on that opportunity? Because you could be sitting back at camp day one, but instead you're about to get ready for your first high school coaching camp.
Yeah. So, I'm gonna say this right now. I mean, it was the hardest decision of my life. I wouldn't say to give up, because I didn't give up. I gave everything I had to the game. But to kind of close that chapter and to open up a new one, I mean, it was kind of hard to, close that chapter. But, a few factors played in, I just turned 25 in May, easily would have been the oldest guy in the room. Fun fact, I'm actually older than Terrell Smith. Yeah, which is, surprising because he's, going on year 7.
So you got the doctorate too then.
Yeah. So, I kind of weighed that and, I knew I had 5 years, to give everything that I had. And, I came out with a bachelor's degree and a master's. So, that was the most important thing to me, being a first generation college student and, college athlete, to kind of change the direction of, my family's future. I take great pride in that. And I also promised myself freshman year when I got there in January of 2016, I said, if I don't have that burning passion, when, we're on that winter break and, it's getting close to get back to work, if I don't have that burning passion, then I know it's time.
Mm-hmm.
And, because if I were to do something, I would give it 110%. I'm 10 toes in and, it wouldn't be fair to me or the coaches or my teammates, the program, everybody, if I came back and I was kind of 50-50 or I didn't give everything that I had. So I was either going to do it or not do it at all. And when it got closer, the coaches, they were recruiting me more than I've ever been recruited in high school in my life. So it was kind of neat. And, just, listening to them and, I wanted to take everybody's opinion, everybody that was important to me. But ultimately at the end of the day, it's what I decide. And, so it kind of, heard the tell them, hey, like I'm good. I'm moving on. What Coach Fuente and Coach Vice and really that whole staff has done for me as a football player and as a man. Like I'm forever, in debt to them. What Virginia Tech has done for me, I'm forever in debt to, the program, the university. And, I'm very blessed to have gone to the best university in the freaking country. And to get an education, a world-class education, and, to play for a program that's, known all around the country as, crazy people, jumping up and down the Enter Sandman and having the best interest in college football and just the atmosphere. It was kind of hard to leave that, leave it on the wayside and move on. But, I'm happy where I'm at right now. And kind of being involved around football, I think that's helped me a lot with coping with me not playing.
Okay.
I think that's a lot of, football coaches, like they get into coaching because they just love the game of football and they don't know what their life would be like if they didn't have it. So,
yeah, it's hard to get rid of that itch.
mm-hmm.
It's always there. Even, I mean, part of the reason that I love doing this is that it kind of still gives me an opportunity to be, a part of that world. So, you never really lose it once you get it. So I definitely see that. We had another listener. He's got a question. We talked about your end time in Blacksburg. Let's talk about kind of what led up to that. What did you like about Fork Union, the time you spent there?
Yeah, I mean, when you hear about Fork Union, it's a military boarding school, all dudes, and you would think that would suck, but it wasn't bad. I mean, as long as you were behaved and you were disciplined and things like that, it was easy. But Coach Schumann over there, he's a legend. He helped me get to where I needed to get to. And without him, I don't know if I was, going to be sitting here talking with you guys with all this Hokie stuff in the background, and having the career that I had at Tech. So, it was a neat experience, very humbling experience. But, I don't know what my life would be like if I didn't kind of take that little detour to get to my final destination. So I shout out to Coach Schumann. He's a goat.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of some of the Tech greats have taken that path through Fork Union. So definitely kudos to Coach Schumann there. Let's pivot a little bit here and talk about last year's offensive line and kind of what this year's offensive line is going to look like for the Hokies. You were part of arguably, definitely probably one of the better offensive lines in the last decade at Virginia Tech. Few pieces have moved on, one way or other there, but kind of what are your expectations for that unit for 2021?
Oh man, I mean, I don't think they'll skip a beat. I mean, you got a lot of guys returning. Brock Hoffman, arguably the best center in the ACC. Top 10, top 15 in the country. And, you got Lasita Smith and, Luke Tenuta. He's come a long way. And, I'm glad those guys are reaping the rewards. Silas Janzi, too. And, of course, Old Man Juice, T. Smitty. There's a lot of guys in there in that room that have experience. And, there's some veteran leadership in that room. And, they're going to bring those young guys along. And they're going to help those young guys develop and, leave that offensive line room better, when they found it, So I'm very excited what they're going to do. They're a hardworking group. They're going to grind and, they're going to put the team on their back. The team goes as the offensive line goes. And, so there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to, keep rolling on that Vice Squad train for sure.
Nice. Now, speaking of the Vice Squad, we've seen a lot of Coach Vice. He's one of those outspoken guys. We saw the video this year, that Hokie Vision did, which was great insight to it. But we haven't seen as much interaction from Coach Cornelison. Behind the scenes coaching perspective, how do they compare to one another? And, what's something maybe a little different about Coach Corn compared to Coach Vice?
I mean, yeah, they're very smart coaches. I know some people have different opinions about Coach Cornelison. But, at the end of the day, the guy knows what he's doing. Like, he wouldn't be in that position, if he didn't know what he was doing. I kind of, had a Zoom meeting with him not too long ago, kind of pick his brain since, I got that JV offensive coordinator role, kind of just, see his, way of seeing the game. And, I always trusted Corn with everything he did with the offense. And, but Vice is that more outgoing, very vocal. If you know what I mean,
Yeah.
Funny as all get out. I would say it's him and Coach Shebest is like the funniest coaches, on that staff. But they really do care about the players and their development, on and off the field. And I mean, the whole staff does, but in terms of these guys, they're very smart coaches. They know what they're doing. Cornelson is kind of, I would say more laid back, if that makes sense. When he like talks to the offensive unit on like Sunday meetings, he was like, "All right, man, we had a good game or a bad game this week, and he puts it on himself and like he'll take the bullets, like every coach should, and but they work so hard, and I appreciate both of them a lot, but when Coach Corn gets mad, like he'll raise some hell, but Vice is that constant fired up mojo, and he's got that haircut and the backwards hat and the sunglasses.
He's fired up whether he's yelling at you or joking with you, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. And trust me, like you just want to talk about Vice off the record, about I got some great stories. But
we're taking you up on that, by the way.
Yeah, so some great stories with Vice, but yeah, like Corn's a little bit more Bill Belichick like in terms of like talking tone, but then he'll also get after you and chew you out if you mess up. But yeah, they're both great coaches, and they bring their, own style and personality, and I think it's kind of good to have different kinds of personality and, different ways of coaching to the team. So, yeah, I mean, great coaches, but, two different personalities in my opinion.
Gotcha. That makes sense too. I mean, we kind of get that, but, not having quite seen as much of Coach Cornelson, it's kind of good to, give fans and things like that some other perspectives there. So that's why we wanted to touch on that a little bit. Let's pivot a little bit more about you. You kind of came to Virginia Tech as a preferred walk-on, but you earned a scholarship while you were in Blacksburg.
Mm-hmm.
What was that feeling like when Coach let you know you were a scholarship athlete?
I mean, it's probably the most like achieving thing I've ever done in my athletic career. I was, under recruited, basically for my height. Like I'm only 6'2". I never really understood, why the height thing was a huge issue. And when I was in the recruiting process, I'm looking at the depth charts of like every school that I was interested in. Mm-hmm. And I saw Tech, they had, Caleb Ferris, Kyle Chung, and Eric Gallo, where they're like 6'2", 6'3" guys. And I'm like, okay, like if Tech says I'm too short, then I know that's complete bullshit. And so, that's what I got. And, I got a scholarship offer to JMU. But then that kind of blew up, and that's a whole different story within itself. But then Shane Beamer recruited me and, gave me the preferred walk-on spot. And, obviously I knew that Tech had a good history with walk-ons and rewarding them for hard work and, and being talented and getting out there on the field. And, hence again, my boss, Sam Rogers, was an example of that. He wasn't on there very long, but, so I knew that like I had a shot, right? But then I was at Fort Union and Beamer retires. And then here comes this coach from Memphis who I knew nothing about, Mm-hmm. And so I was with Fuente since day one. I mean, talking about like January 2016, like I was with him like day one. And, to kind of go on that journey with him and that staff. And, I gave everything I had, and I knew I was like, if I do get it one day, like the train's not going to stop. Like I'm not going to be satisfied.
Yeah.
There's more things on my checklist that I need to check off. And, but that was like the number one thing. And, it was towards the end of camp. I want to say 2019. And, I'm kind of out of it. It was a long day. And, we're about to break out of this team meeting and basically kind of just close camp. And, he said, I need Ish and, Caleb Smith and Austin Cannon in my office. And initially I'm thinking, hold up. When you get called into the coach's office, it's usually not a good thing. Most of the time it's not a good thing. So I'm like, what did I do? I don't know what I did. Yeah. So there was kind of like that anxiety, that kind of, panic for a quick second. And then he paused and then he said, to sign your scholarships. And the whole team meeting room erupted. And, I'm getting swamped by a bunch of teammates with hugs and high fives. And, it took me a little bit to kind of realize and process, like, what the hell's going on. And, when I sat down in front of Fuente in his office to sign, the piece of paper, the pen was just shaking in my hand because I'm like, holy crap, I cannot believe I'm doing this. Because when I had my little signing day, I just had like a Word document saying like I was going to Virginia Tech and like just signed it for the photo op and all that stuff. But to actually do it for real, I was like, pinch me. I think I'm dreaming right now. And, awesome. It was, my parents were on their 25th, wedding anniversary vacation down in St. Martin, and somehow, some way I got a hold of them, and, I just broke down crying in my car, and they couldn't believe it. And, it was surreal. It was a surreal moment, and, I'll never forget it.
Well, I'm sitting here thinking about when he says, Ish, Cannon, Caleb, y'all need to be in my office. Like, how long did he wait? Like, because I'm sure the whole
there was a pregnant pause.
Yeah, like it was probably like a solid, like close to like 10 seconds.
Gosh!
But it was like it could have been shorter, but when you hear your name called, that again, like that panic sets in, and
what did I do?
Yeah, and then like that long pause is longer than you think, than it actually was, and then he said it, and it was awesome. Like, it was awesome. That's all I gotta say.
Man. All right, so we're gonna do a couple little fun questions here. The first one's real simple. It's a yes or no answer. 2 words. TOTS rails.
Yes. Yes.
There we go. Yeah, my man.
Yes. But
what?
For my rookies out there, to all my young Hokies who are just turning 21, you have 2 things to do. All right, when you turn 21, the first place you go to is TOTS. The first thing you order is a rail. And I should say 3. Third thing, don't get too many of those.
Oh, no.
Oh, no. No. I'm a Jack Daniels guy at heart. Love me some Jack Daniels. But, hey, a nice TOTS rail would be nice right now too. So yeah, yes to TOTS rails. Be smart, and that's the first thing you go to when you turn 21.
TOTS rails will sneak up on you.
It will.
Yep. And you're like, oh man, like this isn't bad, and like I'm doing great, and all of a sudden, boom, and it's like you're like, oh, okay. All right. Cool.
Well, I was drinking those sitting down. Now I got a little sponge leg going on.
All right, Brian, you got a question for him?
Yeah, so you got well acquainted with the restaurants in Blacksburg, I'm sure, while you were there. What was the go-to spots for like the lineman lunches or like the victory meals after a big win?
My senior year, me and a couple guys, we went to, certain places. I know Bull and Bones was one of them. We had Blacksburg Tavern. That's really good. If you haven't been there, go there. They had some really great food.
I'm gonna check that out. I haven't been there yet.
But it's not. But this place though is like the holy Mecca. All right, and it's not even in Blacksburg. It's like right outside. Home Place. RIP Home Place. It sucks that they had to close because of COVID. But as an O-line, the entire offensive line, we would go there, late July, kind of like right before camp. And, it's kind of like, Southern Comfort Food, fried chicken, turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, green beans, and the rolls. But it was like an endless amount. Like they just kept coming, until you were like, okay, I'm done. And you could just see the servers and the cooks and all that stuff. And like when they know that the offensive line has showed up, they start, sweating,
It's like, it's going to be a long next hour and a half.
Yeah. And we would actually get the freshman O-lineman. It's kind of like a little initiation. We'll get the bowl of gravy that you would pour in your mashed potatoes. And each of them would have to take like a humongous gulp of it, out of the bowl. So it,
y'all were treating gravy like in Super Troopers, they were treating maple syrup.
Yeah. So, that's a thing that the offensive line has done for a long time. And, it's unfortunate that, that place had to, shut down, because of certain circumstances, but
yeah,
I'm sure they're going to find somewhere else to kind of hold that tradition. And, but yeah, that one for sure is like top notch.
all right. I don't know if you know about this place. You ever been to Tanglewood Ordinary out in Goochland?
Mm-mm.
You need to go there because it's almost exactly like Home Place. It's Southern cooked food, family style. Biscuits, fried chicken, pork roast, green, and they continuously bring it out to you, and they don't stop. So if you need to take your offensive lineman, I know it might be a hike from Mechanicsville. Tanglewood Ordinary out in Goochland, I recommend it. I've been there several times.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I want to kind of hit some with you here. You've been very, very open about your battles with anxiety, depression, and we've seen Simone Biles last week, Naomi Osaka, and other folks as well, but those two were really brought to life a ton. What message do you have for athletes out there listening, about who are experiencing these mental health issues from your perspective, and what sort of advice would you like to give them?
Yeah, I mean, it's okay not to be okay. There's like this stigma, especially with football players, you're tough, you show no emotion, things like that. And I think that's, kind of been pushed for as long as football has been around. And, there's been guys that have battled anxiety and depression, but never really talked about it because they, were scared or, they feared that they would be viewed as soft. Mm-hmm. And, I always believe that, when God made us, he gave us emotion, right? He gave us the emotion to love, to grieve, to be happy, to be sad. And if we didn't have those emotions, then we would be robots, and we're not robots. So it's, it's okay not to be okay, but it, most importantly, you have to speak up about what you're going through. You can't bottle everything up. And that's the mistake that I made. I had all these huge events kind of happen in such a short amount of time that, I just felt like I couldn't handle it any longer, and I didn't really talk about it. And, I try to, in my own life. And, I think in a couple of days here, I think it'll be the 5-year anniversary of that moment. And, I still got the scar on my thigh. And, it's kind of like a daily reminder of where I've been, the lowest point of my life to where I am right now. And, I'm very blessed to be sitting here with you guys right now because 5 years ago, what if I didn't make it out?
Yeah.
And so to all those athletes that, have a lot on their mind and on their plate, find somebody to talk to, whether it's your friends, your family, they're not going to view you as soft or anything different, right? Because, they're a true friend. They're going to care for you no matter what. And your family is going to support you and love you no matter what. And so, to kind of get this snowball going in terms of talking about mental health, it's a two-way street. The athletes or anybody has to go out there and be open about it, be willing to be open about it. And, on the other side, if you're a friend or a family member and you kind of notice, something's kind of off about your friend or your family member, go to them like, hey, are you doing okay? Like, I'm here for you. Just be a listening ear. You might not have all the answers and the best advice in the world, and that's totally okay. But just be a listening ear, and just be, create an environment where, these people that are struggling mentally, have their voices be heard. So that's my advice to anyone who's secretly kind of battling mental issues. I encourage them to go talk to a family member or friend or even a counselor or therapist. And it's for me personally, I think it's a lot better when I go and I talk about what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, and kind of get it off my chest rather than, oh, you know what, this is not a big deal to anybody. Like, I just keep it to myself because, life is going to be hard. The real world is hard. It's cruel. It will beat you down to your knees. But, what's worse is, battling yourself, you versus you. And, you're going to need that support system. And that support system is there, but you just got to go out there and be willing to, use that support system.
Yeah. And I feel like football, even more so than probably some other sports, when we talk about, not being okay, like that has always seemed like to be focused on, okay, well, you need some time because you have an injury, you're concussed, but the mental health aspect never really gets talked about the way it should. And I feel like that's an unfortunate situation because it does kind of condition people to either try to deal with it themselves and bottle it up like you were talking about there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I think it was just, it was hard for me because, I was always viewed as that, that tough guy, on the field, and, off the field, I'm a guy that can talk to anybody, and hang out and be a laid back kind of guy. But, I never really talked about my personal issues. And, and I regretted that, looking back on it, I regretted it because then I wouldn't have had that event happen, 5 years ago. But, you live and you learn. But, I'm glad that mental health is being talked more and more now. And, it goes beyond, being, this stereotype of being a tough guy and all that kind of stuff. Like your mental health comes first. So, I'm glad that this discussion of mental health is being brought into the spotlight, especially, with all that Olympic stuff happening with Biles.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Austin, you just said something, and if that doesn't happen to you 5 years ago, you aren't an advocate now. And for someone like you who's going into coaching, is going to be around a lot of young people, man, I think you're going to have kids just feel so comfortable coming up to you knowing he went through it. He speaks out about it. He constantly tells us, hey, something's going on, come to me. I'm your person. And dude, it takes a man to talk about the stuff you've talked about and to be so open with it. And I applaud you, dude, because there's a lot of us not strong. And I think your influence and, you know, I'm going to say for the whole RVA. You're coaching up in Hanover, but I think your story is going to get to other parts of the RVA. And I'm going to, you know, I just applaud you, man.
No,
absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. Now, before we close up here tonight, you have some guys you want to kind of shout out to real quick?
Yeah.
Little football camps?
Yeah. Shout out to Hanover High School, man. We're about to get ready to go. We're excited to play some football in the fall, not in the spring. And
there we go.
Back where it's supposed to be.
Yeah. And, you know, shout out to my boys, Alec Eberly and Nick Clark. You know, they run their own sports performance gym, Siege Performance in Mechanicsville, right off of 301 behind the Wawa. And also their Hogs Academy. You know, if you're a young offensive lineman and you want to get better, go to them. You know, they're doing a great job with that, and you know, they're the best place for that in the RVA. So shout out to them. Go to them. Get better.
Awesome, man. Well, Austin, we appreciate you joining us tonight. And that is going to wrap up this episode of the Boundary Corner Podcast. I'm Curtis Wilson.
I'm Brian Siegler.
Visit our website at boundarycornerbt.com and listen to all of our episodes. While you're there, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, subscribe on YouTube to our account. Also, subscribe to your favorite podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Apple. We are on all of them. If you're looking to join the Hokie Club and achieve the Reach for Excellence campaign, please visit boundarycornerbt.com/giving to get started. As always, we let our buddy Jason Long down in the NRV play us out. This weekend, Saturday, he will be at the Grandin Village Farmers Market, so go check our boy out. Catch him on Spotify and Apple Music as well. We thank you all for listening and watching tonight. And as always, let's go!
Hokies!